Okay, in this video, we're going to continue the topic of deploying an application that receives Google Cloud events, in this case PubSub, right? But this time we're going to use Cloud Functions. And I think the easiest way of just getting into this topic is just to do it, because it's that simple. And we'll talk about details as we go through. So we go into our project and we go to Cloud Functions. And you just create a function. And we're going to leave the name alone, the region alone. But see, trigger here, we're going to change this to a Cloud PubSub trigger. And we're going to point it at our topic. Okay. And we hit basically save, next. We'll change it to node 14, right? And let's look at the code here briefly. You can see here that basically, if you look at this code, it's basically exporting a function called hello PubSub that takes an event as a parameter. And you can see we're doing similar things that we did in the previous example from the post, where you take the data, you decode it, basically you pull out basically the data element out of the message, and you you just basically extract the base 64 out of it. And then they just have a thing here where if it doesn't exist, they'll return hello world. But in this case, it is going to be triggered by an event, so we'll get out the data from the event. And that's really all there's to it. Now, basically what this is essentially just the post method from our Cloud Run example, right? Where we took a post and we had to extract the base 64 data out of the event. Okay, well, that's basically all there is here. You hit deploy, and I'm going to let this run for a second. I'll pause the video, and then we'll come back and talk about what's happening underneath the hood here. We'll test it, and then we'll validate what's happening under the hood. Okay, we're back. Took about a minute or so. So let's test it, and then we'll poke under the hood, like, how does this thing actually work? It's done. Okay, so to test it, we need to go and publish something. So I'm in my Cloud PubSub example where I was publishing, and I think I just say npm start. That should generate the message. Okay, I got a published message. And then go to my function. I want to look in its logs. Let's see if I can figure out where logs are. Logs. And there it is right here. Here's that foobar entry here, right? There's result. Okay. Okay. So now the question is, how does this message? You'd be thinking, well, how does this function get it's connected to the topic, but how does it? Normally, we have to create subscriptions in order for things to get messages out of Cloud PubSub. Well, it turns out under the hood, with Cloud PubSub, it actually created, when I created the function that tied to that topic, I actually created a function here, a subscription of type push. So push means it's pushing to some HTTP endpoint. And if you look carefully at this detail of it, see, it's right here. You can see that there's actually this hidden endpoint that Google automatically created for us related to this function that basically does a post. It's been up doing a post to here, and then that gets translated into that event that our code actually got. So there's a little bit of auto magic that Google is doing under the hood to make Cloud Functions work with Cloud PubSub. And again, to just wire in a push subscription. Now, the only other thing we want to think about, let me go back to Cloud Functions. One is about scaling, right? And so we don't have to worry about scaling with Cloud Function per se, because basically Google handles it all for us. Basically every time a function gets called, a new instance is essentially created, and it scales up as as more calls come in. It just creates more functions. And again, for like the minimum scaling side of things, it kind of keeps a number of these previously created instances around just to handle the load. So scaling is not something we have to consider here. And then if you think about service accounts and whether I need to authorize this function for Cloud PubSub, we don't, because the way that it interacts with Cloud PubSub is that it has that sort of hidden HTTP endpoint that doesn't require any authentication. So Cloud PubSub just sends a message to that endpoint, and then Cloud Functions gets it to our function. And our function never needs to know anything about Cloud PubSub per se. I mean, in a sense, it doesn't need to have authorization to talk to that subscription. Okay, now that being said, let me see. The last topic here, I just want to do a quick sidebar into identity. So just in case we needed to interact with some Google service, it's always good to know how we can change the identity of the function. So by default, it uses an identity, an IAM of this format, project ID AppSpot. If you recall, this is the same identity that App Engine used. So by default, you get pretty much editor rights, which is pretty wide open. But with just like in some earlier examples, but not App Engine, you can actually change the identity on a per function basis. So just like I think we just did Cloud Run, where you can change it, right? Here you can actually go into the function. If I hit edit, see if I can get into the function and edit. Down here in the runtime, there's a service account. So right now it's App Engine default. You can change it to whatever, you probably create another service account specific for this function, and then you can run it as that account. Okay, I think that's it for this video. Thank you.